You would think, with how bad the economy is in Florida right now, that if you're renting an apartment, it would be more affordable. Rent prices would come down. If you've been watching my YouTube channel, you may notice a series we're doing on the abundance of real estate available in Florida. How many rents are available everywhere. It's like an explosion of rental properties. Even people on the islands like Siesta Key who had vacation rentals are switching them up and turning them into year-round rentals because people perceive that tourism in Florida is destroyed. Despite all that, if you're wanting to live in a suburb in Florida, rent prices are actually increasing. I know that sounds illogical considering the volume of rental properties that are available now in the state of Florida, but I want to explain to you guys why this is happening. The companies that rent these apartments are not going to bring down their prices. In fact, what they're doing is the complete opposite. Despite the abundance of rental properties that exist in Florida, they're going in the complete opposite direction. If you think for a moment that immigration raids and the mass exodus of undocumented people from Florida is going to create opportunities for the people that live here, think again, because the complete opposite is happening. Let me reiterate. They are not going to bring down the prices. So if you think that now you're going to save money on rents, well, let's take a look at the reality. They do have to give people incentives to lease these contracts, but they are by no means changing the final numbers on the contracts, the amount of base rent that you have to pay. So what these apartment complexes are doing now in Florida is that they are offering incentives. They're giving you offers, but they are not going to lower their base rents. Without a doubt, this is a long-term shift in the rental market in Florida, but these companies are going to treat it as a temporary problem by offering people temporary offers. As if this wasn't a correction in rental prices, they're treating it as a slow period. Now let me be clear, before we look at these offers, there is a no association disclaimer on my part. I don't have any association with these companies. I'm not promoting them, and their prices are subject to daily variations, which means that the price that you're seeing today could be completely different by the date that I upload this video. In other words, these are just reference points, not solid pieces of information. We don't have any association with these people, and the information that I'm giving you is information that you have to verify on your own, so don't hold me accountable for sharing this information. And everything that we're going to go over here today is just my personal opinion as well. Renata is a brand new apartment complex in Lakewood Ranch outside of Sarasota and Bradenton. They are currently offering 50% off 4 months of rent. The problem is that a one-bedroom apartment here is going for nearly $2,500 a month. And guys, that's less than 800 square feet. It's a tiny apartment. So basically what they are offering you is simply 2 months of free rent spread over 4 months. That's about a $5,000 incentive to move into these apartments, except for once your 2 months of free rent are over, now you're stuck on the line paying $2,500 roughly for a small one-bedroom apartment. And that's the introductory price. That's your first lease. When you go to renew your lease, people here in Lakewood Ranch like myself are finding that the longer you live in these complexes, the more likely you are to see massive rent increases. In the case of where I live in Lakewood Ranch, I recently saw a over $250 rent increase if I were to renew my contract. Which is why we have considered moving out of our community that we've been at for 3 years now because of the constant rent increases. This is the Bradenton Lakewood Ranch area. You can see in red X's the areas that have a large percentage of undocumented people. These are areas where people are now afraid to go to grocery stores because of immigration raids. Many people that were in these inner city neighborhoods are now looking to rent properties in the suburbs and gated communities where they believe they're safer from immigration profiling. Having their food delivered to them and living inside of gated communities, they reduce their exposure to random immigration searches or police profiling, which has become a staple of the current immigration situation. That is why there is so much more demand now for properties in the suburbs, because so many people from the inner city are trying to camouflage themselves in the suburbs where they're certainly less likely to be profiled. The same thing's happening in Tampa, where people who used to live in the inner city and commute to the outskirts of the city for work are finding that they're better off renting in the suburban outskirts of the city where their work is, building new home construction. This has led to an effect where in the inner city, you have a lot of rents available, but now there's more demand for suburban housing, the areas where we already live, which means increased rental properties, despite the fact that in the inner city, there's a huge abundance of available rentals. As you guys know, most large developments in Florida are going to be gated communities, and there's an abundance of available houses in these areas because they overbuilt. So what the contractors are doing now is that they're housing their workers in the same communities that they're building out in the outskirts. They don't have to commute. They don't have to worry about immigration raids. And in the unfortunate situation that ICE were to raid these construction sites, the individuals will be able to hide in private homes in that community, which means that ICE wouldn't be able to detain them because they don't have search warrants for these properties. Most of the new home construction is happening in the outskirts of cities, places like the outskirts of Tampa and Lakewood Ranch. What many people have discovered is that instead of commuting to these areas and risk getting caught by law enforcement driving without a valid driver's license, leading to a deportation, if they were just to already be in these communities, they can eliminate their exposure. Another component that's going to lead to increased rent prices in Florida is the fact that many foreign nationals who own real estate and businesses operating in the United States are having to leave because of their legal status. And one of the few options that they have is to send their children who are younger and can get student visas into the United States. And that is why you're also seeing a lot of demand, particularly in the coming months around September. You're going to see a lot of demand for student housing. And that is because student visas are perhaps one of the most viable options that people who have businesses in the United States to be able to have somebody here to watch over for them. Thus, you're starting to see a lot of students from other countries continue to exploit these student visas. They're supposed to be here to study, but they're actually coming here to manage businesses. These quote-unquote young professionals are then, of course, driving up the rental property values during the time of the year when they're here, when school starts. And these individuals are another reason why so much demand exists for these type of rental properties. So let's talk about numbers. What does it actually cost to live in some Florida cities? In downtown Tampa, in Ybor City, you can rent a small one-bedroom apartment for $2,000 a month. Now that's before the community fees. Most of these communities are ranging between $114 all the way up to $240. It really varies from place to place. Now you may notice that parking there was inside of a parking garage, and while I don't know if this particular community charges, it's been my experience that when there's a parking garage, they're charging at least $100 a month. That was the case with this community in downtown Cape Coral. It's a new 4-story building that was built right in the downtown of the city. Now they're advertising apartments for $1,500 a month. But did you notice it said starting at $1,500 a month? When you show up, it's not really $1,500. It's starting at $1,500, which means it's really $1,600. Now, this community told me that their community fees were over $215. So that brings the total to $1,800 a month, plus $100 a month to park. That brings the total to just under $2,000 a month for a small one-bedroom apartment. So you might look at their website and say, well, I can live in downtown Cape Coral for $1,500 a month, But when you actually go there and get the full picture of all the fees they're going to charge you, it's actually closer to $2,000 a month. And while Cape Coral's downtown is a nice place to live, that simply isn't competitive with the real estate market right now. In Lakewood Ranch, as overpriced as it is, for $2,000 a month you can get a tiny one-bedroom apartment. And as ridiculous as $2,000 a month is for a one-bedroom apartment, at least in Lakewood Ranch, there's jobs and opportunities. There isn't anything to do in Cape Coral. It's a city that doesn't have any industry. In the Port Charlotte area, we looked at an apartment called Swiftwater, and here they are offering 3 months of free rent. Now, we toured these apartments and they looked very nice and the staff was very helpful, but already, despite being a brand new complex, the reviews that are recent are not exactly stellar, with new residents calling this place a living nightmare, complaining mostly about the low quality of the build. Now, this community really is a bargain, with one-bedroom apartments at around $1,500 and 2 bedrooms under $2,000. It is significantly more affordable than anywhere else in Southwest Florida for a new apartment, with the most obvious thing that you have to note is the low build quality, on top of the fact that, well, what the crap are you going to do for a living in Port Charlotte, Florida? I mean, even if you had a job that was remote, what are you going to do with your free time in Northport or Port Charlotte, Florida? There's literally nothing there. But you want to live somewhere fun? How about beautiful South Tampa? A small one-bedroom is starting at $2,500. And you'll notice a trend that when they build somewhere affordable like Port Charlotte, the amenities offered are less. From the renter's perspective, it would really make sense that if an area is more affordable, you could offer more amenities, but that's not the way builders and developers look at it. If you want any type of amenities or bang for your buck, you're going to have to spend more money in a more expensive area, which means that comparatively, there really isn't too much of an incentive for somebody renting to end up somewhere more affordable when they don't have packages for amenities. It almost seems like they purposely do not want a middle ground. You're either paying $1,500 for the absolute bottom of the market, or now you're forced into a very expensive packet in a large city. It would make sense, for example, in Port Charlotte, since it's a more affordable area, that there you would have more amenities, you would have more land available, but that's not the way they're building these complexes. The business plan for these developers and leasing companies is profit incentive only. They do not care about the practicality that they can offer or the living conditions that they create for the residents. The issue becomes that if you're leasing, you could actually find a better deal in an expensive city than you can in a suburban area. I mean, it's a no-brainer that if you built luxury apartments in the outskirts of cities where land was more available and you could offer more to the people renting, that these things would sell instantly. But again, that is counterintuitive. That's not the way they want housing to be. In Lakewood Ranch, the outskirts of Sarasota, a 2-bedroom, 2-bath apartment right now starts at a base rent of $2,264. When you throw in your community fees, you're somewhere between $2,500 to $2,600 a month. If you hop over to the East Coast, Sunrise, a nice suburb of Fort Lauderdale, you're going to spend about $2,300 a month for a studio. When you throw in your community fees, you're probably at around $2,600 a month for a studio. That's smaller than a 1-bedroom. If you want to live in Miami, we found a place in West Kendall. Now, this is the extreme western end of Miami, so incredibly long commute with horrible traffic. In this area of Miami, a 1-bedroom apartment, a older, decrepit one, a Casa Vera, will start at about $2,100 a month. Now, if you want newer appliances, you'll notice there's a huge gap on the prices here. If you want a remodeled apartment, the same size, a 1-bedroom, will run you about $3,000. And if you want a 2-bedroom in Miami that's recently remodeled, you're going to be at close to $4,000 a month for a 2-bedroom apartment in Miami. When you throw in your community fees and other expenses, well into the $4,000 range for only a 2-bedroom bath apartment. This is the reality of living in Florida right now. You're practically having California prices with Mississippi salaries here in Florida. The unaffordability of housing for young people here is a serious concern. This right here really is capitalism at its finest. Lake Mary is a beautiful suburb on the north side of Orlando, and it's here where we found a place called Solis Timacuan. In this community, we found a one-bedroom apartment for around $1,600 a month. This really was a great option. It's gated, it's beautiful, it's safe, it's clean, the staff was friendly, and you're in a good area of Orlando, close to areas where there's a lot of work. It's in Seminole County, which is really analytically safe. Great place to live overall. The price was right, but I don't really know anybody in Orlando, and it seems like moving to a city where you don't know anybody would be a recipe for depression. You can even get a 2-bedroom here for like less than $1,900. That's great for being in the Orlando area. And you can actually talk these people down to a little bit less if you take an older apartment with older appliances. Now, finding this complex was really the needle in the haystack when it came to Orlando. We had looked at about 10 different places in Orlando, starting at around $1,700 a month. And when you showed up, the conditions were horrific. Many apartment complexes have more tenants than they do parking spaces, and then they have tow trucks that come in at night and tow people's cars away, charging the residents for doing that. And on top of that, they probably give a kickback to the apartment complex for letting them tow those vehicles. It's a complete racket in Orlando. This is just one of the many nightmares of renting in the Orlando area. It seems like almost everything that we saw in Orlando was garbage, with this particular complex being the only one that really made any sense. Now we have found a lease. We have already decided on where we're going to move, something that our subscribers have been anxiously awaiting. The answer will be revealed to you guys probably during a live stream, so make sure you tune into those. But it comes down to finding a deal, finding a complex in a city that is affordable, has all the amenities. It isn't going to try to screw you. There's 1,000 red flags or possibilities for things can go wrong. If in the apartment complex that you're moving to, cars are being towed, that's a red flag. Somebody's getting a kickback to make sure that your car gets hauled away, and every other month you're going to be paying for your vehicle to be towed. Park it an inch over in the wrong direction, your car's gone. This is definitely a red flag, and sadly it's very prevalent. It's becoming a problem in Tampa and particularly in Orlando. In Miami, this has always been a problem. Basically, it's apartment complexes where somebody's getting a kickback to make sure that the tow company has access to the community 24/7, where they can tow your vehicle away for practically nothing. The issue with finding rents right now, finding communities that are upfront about their pricing. If when you show up, the pricing that they're telling you isn't what they're advertising, walk right the crap out. If they're trying to charge you for extracurricular activities that are not in the program, like parking or excessive community fees that don't match the norm, walk right out. Another catch right now with a lot of these communities offering people incentives like the month free or the 2 months for free is the following. These are 12-month leases. When you go to renew that lease, and that's going to come around quicker than you think because they're giving you a free month here or there, right? Next thing you know, your 10th payment, 2 months free rent, you're going to find yourself renewing your lease, and then they jack up the prices. You got to be really careful with the shorter term leases because that's an opportunity for them to reevaluate the current market and decide to give you a rent increase. You're never going to see a rent decrease, even if the market demands it, by the way. With SB 1718, when about 30% of my community became vacant because of the immigration laws that the state of Florida made, that was the time for us to renew our lease. They were not going to drop our rent. What they did is that they gave us a $1,000 bonus off the next month's rent if we renewed our lease. So no, you're not going to see a rent reduction. There's always an incentive. If you're renewing your rent, they're going to say, well, here's a $1,000 bonus, or well, here's 2 months free if you sign a new lease. But don't think for a minute that the prices are going to come down. If you're renewing the lease, there's incentives. If you're signing a new lease, there's a lot of incentives. But the price at the end of the day will always be the same. When you go to renew your lease, don't believe for a second that you're going to see anything less than an increase in your rent. If you for a moment thought that these immigration changes were going to reduce the rent prices for us, a combination of people being here on student visas and people trying to live in the suburbs and get away from the inner cities because of immigration raids in more vulnerable areas are actually having the complete opposite effect. Rent increases. On top of that, the biggest problem that these communities are having now is that they simply can't find workers. I've sat here and watched as 3 different companies have ran through our apartment complex and they've all quit, unable to keep up the community because they don't have undocumented people to do the work. Simply put, not only is your rent price not going to be reduced, but on top of that, the community service fees that you're paying are most likely going to see an increase because they can't find people to do those things. Garbage collection in our community has become a nightmare. There used to always be somebody to do that. At the moment, I saw this week my garbage sit there for about 3 days. They didn't pick it up. They had nobody to do it. Landscaping, you've seen my videos where apartment complexes have grass 2 feet high outside. This is happening in a lot of places. Pools that aren't getting cleaned, landscaping work that isn't getting done, valet garbage services that you pay that isn't being collected. This is the new norm when it comes to apartments in Florida because they don't have workers. I call it the Alabama effect. It's where because there are no workers, you can just expect services to be lackluster, insufficient, and don't complain about it. This is exactly what you wanted. It's like that Starbucks in Prattville, Alabama that takes 45 minutes to an hour to make a sandwich. This is the reality of not having undocumented workers. I call it the Alabama effect. I remember in 2020 when I lived in Alabama, everywhere you went, it was an hour wait to get through a drive-thru. Here in Florida, you can get a drive-thru in and out in 10 to 15 minutes at most. Crap, I've been in and out of a drive-thru here in 6 minutes. But it's pretty obvious that I've been living in this community now for about 3 years, and for the first time I'm seeing landscaping work that's bad. I'm seeing issues with the pool. I'm seeing the garbage not being collected, and while other communities have other complaints, all coming from the fact that they just can't get workers. I'm seeing people also place work orders. Their washing machine breaks. Guess what? They may not have somebody to do that at the community at the moment. Some of these communities right now might have 3 treadmills at the gym and maybe only one of them is working. That's the reality of the labor shortage. You're not seeing lower rent prices. You're seeing the same prices. In fact, in some circumstances, you're going to start to have to charge you more because they can't find people to do it. But in the meantime, you're going to have to put up with the lack of basic services. Citria, this is off of Fruitville and 75 in Sarasota, fast growing area. They're offering you 50% off 4 months rent, which is equivalent to the 2 free months that some places are offering. And in some more cases, like in Port Charlotte, it's already getting to the point of 3 free months of rent. Now, I do believe a lot of these incentives will start to disappear by mid-September as the students and the snowbirds and the tourists start to return to Florida. So I think this could be a momentary thing, but there's no guarantee that this season will be anything close to the last few seasons we've had. In fact, I drive Uber and I'm friends with other people who drive Uber, and it's the worst year that we've ever seen in Florida. People in the Fort Myers area are reporting that they're only making between $30 to $45 a day on Uber. It's an exceptional day on Uber in Fort Myers if you can get above $60 right now. And in the Sarasota and Bradenton area, you used to make $100 in 3 hours. Right now, to make $100, you're probably going to have to drive upwards of 8 hours. Over the last year, I've literally been paying my rent by Uber driving just 20 hours a week. That is no longer the case. There is just way too little passengers. It's a combination of immigration law with hurricanes, with Florida's horrible economy. A few things are state issues, a few things are national problems, but at the end of the day, the state of Florida tourism is destroyed. International tourism in particular is very weak. In a city like Sarasota, with places like Siesta Key and Anna Maria Island that are international tourist destinations, you bet we're feeling the pain here. On this particular day, I noticed for rent signs on Siesta Key. It's abnormal to see that. You would think with vacation rentals there'd be so much demand for that it wouldn't happen to be that somebody has a full-time annual rental on the island, but they're abundant right now, and they're on par with the cost of apartments. That is absolutely insane. You'd think that all this would equate to rent prices dropping in Florida, but it hasn't. All they're doing is giving people temporary incentives because they don't want to distort the image of what it should cost to rent in Florida. They're hoping that this actual persistent problem at this point can be portrayed as a temporary problem so that they can continue charging the rent prices that they did previously. They don't want to adjust. All right, so another catch you got to watch out for is communities that want more than $100,000 renters insurance. So for the most part, most renters insurance in Florida is going to be about $100,000. Some of the lower, crappier apartment complexes, for some reason, have stricter insurance requirements than the newer communities that are more luxurious. So if you end up going with a cheaper option, at the end of the day, the insurance will eat you up there. Another thing that you have to consider when moving is that you may find an area where rents are $200 or $300 cheaper, but in that particular zip code, your auto insurance may increase for just as much. For example, when we were living in the Fort Myers area, our car insurance was almost 2 times more than what it is here in Lakewood Ranch. So you may find an area where the rents are more affordable, but combine that with an increase in the minimal requirement for renters insurance and your car insurance going up dramatically, and whatever you're saving on rent, you're losing to insurance. That's usually a problem that homeowners are facing in Florida, but it's starting to be a thing with renters too. Now, whether you're looking in Tampa, Orlando, Sarasota, Fort Myers, or Naples, if you look long enough and go to enough apartment complexes, you will find a cream of the crop, a needle in the haystack apartment complex that meets all your requirements. You can actually end up living in a nicer, newer apartment with less utilities, less insurance, lower rents, and newer, nicer complex. The issue is that you're going to have to do your footwork if you're going to rent. Now, we did an extensive research of different cities, different options, different sizes of apartments to try to find the most convenient offer for an apartment, and we did find it. But in the process of finding that, boy, did we have to go through some bad options. One of the most awful options that resonate with me is the one that exists off of the MLK exit in Tampa, Florida. It goes without saying that living off of MLK and Interstate 75 across from a giant trailer park isn't exactly prime real estate. And while they are offering the 2 months of free rent, it is on select units that will probably have the lease term agreements of time period that will have you renewing that lease the quickest. Again, personal opinion disclaimer, this is just the way I view things. A small 1-bedroom apartment here is starting at over $1,900 a month. So throw in your community fees, you're easily into the $2,000 range to live off the exit of MLK and 75 in Tampa. That's not exactly stellar. And I don't mean to disrespect my subscribers in Sefner, but this is probably not the type of area you even want to go for a walk at night. And the crazy thing is that you can literally find a cheaper apartment out the door with all the community fees that's nicer than this, has a larger square footage, is in a better area for less money. So you can't just bite every single offer that's out there. You have to know what's going to work best for you. And one of the craziest things that I've noticed is that an abundance of these apartment complexes are going to offer you on the internet, starting at $1,500, starting at $1,499. But when you get there, there's a particular term that they use on selected offers, on selected units that are very limited. In fact, when you read their vocabulary, you'll see this vocabulary on their advertisements. It's on select units. There's only so many left. So read the fine print. You see there in red, it says limited availability. That means that they had one unit at that price. So you're at home doing your research in front of a computer and you see an apartment for $1,500 or $1,400. You say, wow, look, this apartment complex is $1,400. When you arrive, oh, wait, we don't have that anymore. The one we do have is $200 more a month, but you're already here. So let's take a look at these units. That is the type of little detail you have to look out for right now if you're renting. It's a very deceitful practice. Places will advertise that they have apartments for $1,500, and then when you go to look at them, it doesn't really exist. They're wasting your time, and it's actually more than that. Then there's other apartments like the one that I told you about in Lake Mary, where if you talk to them, they may have an apartment that's a little bit older, and even though they're advertising for $1,700, maybe they can get you in for $1,600. So again, there's people out there that want to help you get a good deal, and there's people out there that are going to cover up and be deceitful. And that doesn't mean that the person at the front desk or giving you the tour is a good or bad person. It's just the way that their incentives are set up, or the way that they advertise their community could be deceitful. Marlow is a new community in Upper Manatee in Lakewood Ranch, and this community is offering 2 months of free rent. Their 2 bedrooms are not competitive. They're at nearly $2,500, and this community is very subpar. It's far behind on the amenities and luxury of other Lakewood Ranch apartments. So that $2,500 price for a 2-bedroom here doesn't make sense. It is a brand new community, but the materials that they use seem to be very bad. On top of that, I get this feeling that their leasing agreements are very scammy, but that's only my own personal opinion. And again, disclaimer, that's just my opinion. I didn't think they were very straightforward. Now, if you want a deal on a really small apartment, they do have, and the guy offered me for like $1,500 out the door, everything included, a very small 1-bedroom apartment. But to me, the build quality was very low. The apartment was very boxy, and I just felt like it was just too substandard for me. But if you're not picky, for $1,500 on Lakewood Ranch, you can't beat that. And I think what the guy did is that he spread out those 2 free months over the entire year to where your rent would be like $1,400 a month, and you just can't get a new build for that price. But let me be clear. It's a very low quality new build, and it's an apartment on the 4th story with a long walk. It's not exactly ideal, but if you just need affordable, clean, small place, and you're okay with having like 2 windows or something, you're not too picky, I guess this would be a very good deal. So again, for me, I found it to be seriously disadvantaged, but if that's the particular thing you're looking for in Lakewood Ranch, it could work for you. Like if you're a single person and you want to live in Lakewood Ranch, that offer at Marlow would be good for you. It simply wouldn't be good for me because of the things that I needed are different. So what for one person could be a really crappy deal, for somebody else could be exactly what they're looking for. In the case of Marlow, they advertise fairly low prices, and when you get in there, they show you an even lower price. But what you may overlook is the low quality of the build, the small kitchens, and even in Naples, they're offering 2 months of free rent, but they want you to lease for at least 13 months or longer, which means that they know that Naples is more transient. They want you there hooked at that price for longer. That's not exactly the case here in Lakewood Ranch, but that's the way they're going for it in Naples. So it seems like right now throughout the state of Florida, 2 months free rent is the standard everywhere, and most people are having to conform to it because everybody's doing it. Now, there's a few exceptions. There's places like St. Petersburg where the rents are ridiculously high and somebody's always going to pay it. So in those particular circumstances, they don't have to offer you an incentive. So in the case of St. Petersburg, if you want to live here, there aren't too many incentives. They're not that competitive and the rents are ridiculously high. But this is a different type of renter that wants to live here near the water. So you might ask yourself, why is the St. Petersburg real estate market so much more resilient than all these other places? Well, because St. Petersburg has the lowest foreign-born population. So if you think I'm just talking a bunch of liberal tit-dirt down there, No, it's not. The reason why St. Petersburg is the steadiest market right now, where they don't have to have incentives compared to these other cities in Florida, St. Petersburg doesn't have that much foreign-born population pressure. It's a market that's pretty steady. There simply isn't an immigration pressure here because this area had never really been colonized by migrants. It's mostly native-born population here, thus their real estate market is very steady. Good luck finding an authentic taco place in St. Petersburg. It's all hipster crap and Midwestern people. Nothing wrong with that, but it's just endemically very different than, let's say, Fort Myers or Port Charlotte, where they're having to offer 3 months. It's just a different price point with a different type of renter, and it's going to have a completely different type of economical impact during certain times of the year, during certain circumstances. It's just a completely different market. The person paying that kind of money to live there in St. Petersburg ain't the same person renting in Port Charlotte. Now back to Allure, Naples. A 1-bedroom apartment is nearly $2,400 a month plus all your other fees. In other words, Naples is still more expensive than Lakewood Ranch, but there's a lot more options in Lakewood Ranch than there are in Naples. Now, when you look at Naples, an apartment that expensive with that much of an incentive for you to move in there, and you have to sign for at least 13 months, lets you know that the long-term expectation for rentals in Naples isn't a good-looking one. They're going to expect a correction down there that's going to affect what apartments can rent for. So in places like St. Petersburg, they're not too worried. In places like Naples, they definitely have a lot to worry about. But you think about tourism in St. Petersburg, you think about beaches, you think about hospitals, you think about a downtown, you think about a new skyscraper coming to the city. There's a lot of reasons why somebody may have to live in St. Petersburg. But in the case of Naples, it's just a luxurious, fancy coastal town. There's no real reason for somebody to live there. So in times like this, when there's so many options, they really got to get creative. All right, guys, that is today's video. Sorry for having to draw these videos out for so long. It's really kind of difficult for me to formulate these videos and not say everything I got to say and get everything off my chest about the topic, because at the end of the day, somebody out there really is going to need all this information if they're trying to solve the same problems that we are. Where the crap to live. My advice to you is, if you really want to live in a particular area, exhaust all the options. A mile away could be another community that will be a completely different price range and could even be better than the more expensive option. It's just the way the market is right now. And remember, there's only so much research you can actually do on the internet. So go to 4 or 5 of these different places. It's going to take a lot of time waiting around, getting the right people. But at the end of the day, if you look hard enough, a lot of the opportunities that are going to come at your way are the things that happen on site, on scene, not over the phone or over the internet. It could just be that when you walk into that office, they got somebody that's moving out unexpectedly and they happen to have the exact unit that you need for the exact purpose that you do. And the fact that you walked in there that day in person, the person liked you face to face, and they had an offer for you, could be the one chance you get at getting a better deal. And that's a deal you're going to find in person, not on the phone or over the internet. If you walk into a place, it might seem great on the internet, but when you go there in person, it could all be a scam and a gimmick. And a place that may seem to be more expensive, when you go in there and talk to them in person, they might be like, you know what? We are more expensive. Let me find you a better deal. And that person, real life person, face to face, could find you a better option. If you want to find rents, you can't be in a rush. There's a lot of options out there. There's a lot of bad deals, but there's also a lot of offers and opportunities. Many times your research has to be on the ground footwork. You might just meet a salesperson face to face that likes you, remembers you, and a few weeks later you get a phone call with a great offer, and they might be like, look, I can make this $150 less for you particularly, because what we have now is exactly what you need. So don't be afraid to get on the ground. A lot of the research that you do on the internet is going to be very dramatically from the footwork you do in person. You might think that because they have to post every unit that they have on the internet, that those are the prices and that's all it is. But in real life, I've seen places when you walk in there, they like you, they see you got a good rental history, this and that. They want you, they're going to work with you. You show them, hey, I like this place, everything's good, but, I saw a place down the road that's offering me 2 months of free rent, and I saw a place over here that's $100 cheaper. If you can match that here, this is what I want, and they may make that work for you. Everything is about the paper trail, so do your research, go to a place, be prepared, see their prices, and if you think their prices are too high, tell them. I say, hey, I like this community, I really want to live here, but that community down the road is offering 2 months of free rent, and the other community down the road is just as nice, but they're $100 cheaper. Could you combine these things together and make it work for me? They may be willing to do it. After all, they are not seeing that many people walk into those leasing offices as before, and the fact that these incentives are out there are a clue that it isn't that hard to find you, the person in the apartment. It's not going to reflect in the monthly rental price, never will, but it can reflect in offers and other opportunities. You have to be diligent and get out there and find out for yourself. Now, when we talked about leaving this area, it was because of rental prices. I was able to find better rental prices here, competitive with anywhere else in the United States, which means that it isn't exactly about finding the part of the country that's more affordable, but by finding an option near where you live that fits your needs better could be the solution you need versus having to move halfway around the world. More information will come on our move in the future, but please do not breathe down our throats with this topic. Moving has been extremely stressful and difficult for us. So if you could just show us a little bit of space, I would really appreciate it, because just like everybody else out there, we are struggling to make things work in an increasingly difficult time of life we're in right now. So just hold on tight, be decent and respectful, and eventually you guys will get some more of the answers you guys want. We are staying in Florida, I can tell you that, and it's because our family is here, and that should always be the number one thing in your life. Being close to family and friends is an important thing, and moving somewhere right now with the world conditions that we have to a place where absolutely nobody can be very challenging. You may be in a circumstance where you have to do that, but if you have a large and extensive group of family and friends like we do, then that's not really the most practical choice. Again, give us a little bit of space and respect on that, and eventually you guys will know where we're going to be living. Eventually we're going to be less like Sarasota Tim and more like The World According to Briggs or Nick Johnson, where you get the videos, you get the content, the information, but less of the personality. It isn't that we don't want to be personal with you guys. It's just that there are way too many weirdos out there. And at the end of the day, we're not personalities. Maybe to a few thousand of you guys we are, but in general, the bulk of our content is real estate, travel, Florida, and other types of informative videos. I can't think of a single personal antic video that we've ever done that has got more than 5,000 views. It just doesn't happen. And the reality of it is that maybe to a few of you guys we're celebrities, but the reality is that it's not our personalities that are selling these videos, it's the information. And if we get carried away with our personalities like some YouTubers are doing right now, it's actually more of a roadblock than it is a bridge to a future of YouTube content creation. We've been on YouTube since 2012. There's been ups and there's been downs, but we've been consistent. And part of that consistency is being able to look forward, not get stuck at the moment, getting engulfed in our personalities or inflamed with our celebrity famous status. That is never really the avenue for people that are just run of the mill. I'm not exactly Jagger here, so there's nothing here that's going to make my personality an online celebrity. So again, we're just going to focus more in the future on just giving you guys informative videos, because really, I know you guys enjoy some of these videos, but we do have to make some changes to the way we upload if we want to be successful on a platform that continues to change every single day.